Silent Hill, the official novel. Written by Sadamu Yamashita, translated by Emily, Lady Ducky, Fitch. Chapter 2. Jody. He had met her during the fall of her sophomore year of college. After hearing that she broke up with her high school boyfriend, he gathered all of his courage and approached her. Having spent so long living in the shadow of unrequited love, he wanted to offer as much comfort as possible to this girl that he had only ever spoken to in his dreams. Truthfully, he had been infatuated with her since high school, watching her daily with longing eyes but never able to tell her how he felt. He remembered how ashamed he'd been when he'd asked her to a dance, only to learn that she was already going with someone else. But none of that mattered once they finally met. The two of them were so blissfully in love that they were wed before either of them graduated. Every day of the 9 years since then felt like their honeymoon. Even when Harry decided to quit his job and become a freelance nonfiction writer, she supported him wholeheartedly. From their perfect love, they created a perfect life, even though they were never blessed with children. 9 years after their fated meeting, Jody went to heaven. Although it felt more like God had stolen her away and forcibly dragged her to heaven. One day, as she was walking home from work, a burglar caught in a police chase sped at breakneck pace over the curb and crushed her. Her face was just as beautiful as it had been when she was alive, as she slept in her coffin. Cheryl, too young to understand the concept of death, could only stare with her innocent little eyes. Jody? Jody. Cheryl. Cheryl! Harry called out, sitting bolt upright on the bench he had been resting on. You're finally up, huh? How are you feeling? A woman said with a faint smile. It wasn't Jody, and it most certainly wasn't Cheryl. She had short, blonde hair and a face that wore no makeup, but instead wore a tough, almost masculine expression. She was looking down at Harry, her arms crossed. Her gaze wasn't that of a woman eyeing a man, but of someone observing a suspect to determine his guilt. It came as no surprise when Harry spotted the badge she wore over her dark blue police uniform. Surprisingly enough, I think I'm okay, Harry answered. No sooner did he speak than a jolt of pain ran through his left shoulder. He grimaced and looked around. The bench he was seated on was next to a table, which was next to several other sets of tables and seating. Across the table sat a long counter, with many posters and menus posted above it. He was inside a restaurant. You're lucky you only got off with a couple bruises. A little longer and you probably would have gotten yourself eaten. So you're the one who saved me? Yeah. The police officer shrugged like it was no big deal. There was one thing that was still getting on Harry's nerves. Still, you're a cop, aren't you? What's going on with this town's security? I tried to call the station earlier to get some help, but I couldn't get it to connect. Please, my daughter's gone missing. We need to hurry and go look for her. The policewoman answered Harry's criticism and frantic plea with a cool, calm attitude. You're a tourist, aren't you? Yeah, what's the matter? I'm not actually from this town. I'm an officer from Brahms, the next town over. The name's Sybil Bennett. And you are? Harry. Harry Mason. Hold on, you're that Harry Mason? The one who wrote The Criminal's Mask? Yeah. I just finished reading that. Your sociological analysis of offenders who go unnoticed in communities under the guise of normal citizens was interesting and quite useful. It's an honor to meet you, even if it is the best of circumstances. I guess it really is a small world. Harry could hardly believe the coincidence. What were the chances of meeting one of his readers in a place like this? His immediate reaction was to thank her for contributing to the book's meager sales, but he stopped himself. He wasn't here to sign any autographs. When the officer reached out for a handshake, Harry ignored the gesture and shouted, What about my daughter? Cheryl, was it? You were muttering something about her while you were out. Yes, it's bad enough that she's all alone out there. But if there are any more of those creatures, please, we have to go to the police and gather a search party as soon as possible. Sybil paused for a moment, as if reluctant to tell such grim news to a man already near hysterical. Sorry to say this, but I haven't been able to track down another officer anywhere in this town. What? We haven't been receiving any contact from Silent Hill in some time, so I came to check it out. The whole town is empty, like everyone just up and left overnight. That's impossible. Must not be, since you're the only person I've been able to find. I saw you go into that alleyway, so I followed you just in time to see that monster appear from the fog. I was just barely able to drive it off with my gun and save you. was a bit of a struggle just to drag you this far." Sybil shrugged and let out a soft chuckle. "I should head to Brahms and get some help. Must be the fog or something, but I can't get my radio to work either. You should leave town too. I know you're worried about your daughter, Mr. Mason, but that's the matter best left to the police. Since I crashed my bike, we'll have to take your car back to Brahms anyway." "That won't work," Harry shook his head. "My Jeep's in a ditch right now. That's how Cheryl ended up missing in the first place." Jesus, it just keeps getting worse. It's way too dangerous for you to stay in this town alone. Maybe, but Cheryl's in just as much danger. If she got lost while trying to look for me, then I'm more likely to find her if I stay here. So, what are your plans if you run into another monster? Don't worry, I have a weapon. I just couldn't use it before because that creature caught me off guard. Harry reached into his jacket pocket and reached for his 9mm handgun. Ever since being ranting about criminals, he found that he'd quickly become a supporter of gun possession. He firmly believed that even if guns disappeared from this country, crime wouldn't, and he'd much rather have such a necessary tool if he ever needed to protect his daughter. He had this weapon stashed in the Jeep's glove box, and had grabbed it at the first sign of trouble. However, rather than the cold touch of steel, his hand felt nothing inside his pocket. Harry checked his pants pockets and found that they too were empty. He mentally retraced his steps, desperately trying to think of anywhere it could be, even checking to see if it had fallen underneath the bench he had been lying on. "Lose something." Sybil's tone reminded Harry of a mother scolding a child over losing their favorite toy. "I must have dropped it when that monster hit me." Harry felt some of his courage slip away. Still, that alley couldn't be too far from here, if he could just make his way back there. "I'll manage. I'll find her no matter what I have to do." Sybil shrugged again and sighed. "You're being very reckless, you know." "I know, but risking my life is better than sitting back and waiting for someone else to bring my daughter home safely." "So you really want to stay, huh?" Sybil said, finally realizing how useless it would be to argue any further. She stepped behind the counter and pulled a small automatic handgun from the shelf below the register. The owner of this restaurant must have kept it close as an anti-burglar measure. "Take this, and be sure to watch yourself." She placed the gun in Harry's hand. "And don't die. I'd like to read your next book." Her face softened into a coy smile, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "Thanks, and sorry for losing my temper earlier." Harry eyed the weapon in his hands. For the first time since he found himself in the disastrous situation, he was beginning to feel like he had someone on his side. "Now, I want you to stay put, okay? Don't leave this building." "Got it." Even as Sybil turned to leave the cafe, she didn't doubt for a second that he'd break that promise as soon as she was gone.